students, today we'll be discussing Kautilya's ideas on diplomacy and warfare as enunciated in his Arthashastra. The objective behind today's discussion is to give you an insight about his ideas on diplomacy and expansionism. We would also give you an understanding about the various principles of diplomacy as well as the significance of diplomacy in ancient India. The entire discussion is divided into a number of segments. We would start by defining diplomacy, then we would move on to the tactics of diplomacy and warfare, and finally we would concentrate on the theory of Rajmandala or Mandala and its applicability. Kautilya's Arthashastra is one of the finest treatises on statecraft, administration, governance, law and order, diplomacy and international relations. Today, diplomacy is an integral part of international relations. But it is so interesting and amazing to note that 2000 years ago, Kautilya provided a significant elaboration on principles of diplomacy and warfare, wanting to place Chandragupta Maurya as the world emperor. He devised strategies and tactics to ensure that Chandragupta emerges as the #1 ruler. Kautilya was definitely successful. His ideas on diplomacy are interesting insofar as they can be applied in modern context also. They are highly contemporary. Now let us move on to the Kautilyan Arthashastra and the diplomatic precepts. The Arthashastra provides a significant discussion on war, diplomacy, international relations and foreign policy. And these are not just theoretical constructs, students. There is a wide-ranging discussion on the applications of these different principles of diplomacy, warfare and foreign policy. Kautilya was an expansionist who felt that the main idea was not just preservation of the state but also to conquer territories of others. In fact, it is the Rajmandala theory which provides the basis for Kautilya's diplomacy and foreign policy. The Arthashastra has fascinating discussions on how an inferior ruler can become powerful, how a superior ruler can use different strategies in order to keep on annexing territories in the vicinity. And students, Kautilya emphasizes again and again that these concepts of friendship and enmity in international relations is not something permanent. There are no concept of permanent friends and foes. The system is dynamic, ever changing, and that's what we find in today's world also. Let us start with meaning of diplomacy as provided in the Arthashastra. Kautilya defined diplomacy as a series of actions taken by a king to such an extent that it picks up power and in the end vanquishes the country with which strategic ties has been made. He also says a monarch who understood the factual implication of diplomacy masters the entire world. Kautilya illustrated on tactics for the strong ruler and the assailant as well as clarified the approaches for a powerless state. And what can that powerless ruler do in order to safeguard himself from superior and strong rulers? His types of diplomacy relied upon the kind of ruler and whether the approach was coordinated towards a superior ruler, an inferior ruler or an equal one. He characterized dominance, diplomacy from three perspectives: armed dominance, armed supremacy, financial supremacy and geographical expansion. Diplomacy was supposed to operate in countries based on their political, financial and economic self-interest. In other words, students, every country followed a diplomatic precept based on that country's self-interest. What today we understand with national interest. And when Quintilian was referring to self-interest, he was referring to political self-interest, expansionism, economic self-interest, that those diplomatic precepts and their application should bring in prosperity to the nation. At the same time, military self-interest, expansion of armed forces. Let us move on to the tenets of diplomacy. Kautilya was a political realist, and as a political realist, he assumed that every nation acts to maximize his power and self-interest, and therefore moral principles and precepts have little or no force in actions among nations. In other words, morality was not an important part in diplomatic relationship. Whether one goes to war or remains at peace depends entirely upon the self-interest or advantage derived to one's kingdom. War and peace were solely considered from the point of view of profit. One keeps an ally or a mitra, Kautilya says, not because of goodwill or any kind of social obligation, but because one is strong and can advance one's own self-interest as well as the self-interest of that mitra or ally. Because when one has an army, one's ally also remains friendly. And sometimes a strong army can also make an enemy become a friendly ally. Coming to the relationship between diplomacy and warfare, Kautilya illustrated that kingdoms were either at war or preparing for war, and diplomacy was a kind of tool utilized as a part of this consistent warfare. He moreover argued that agreements ought to be made in such a way that it advantages the self-interest of the ruler and it makes the ruler powerful. He also spoke of breaching arrangements, breaching treaties, violating treaties, so that one can become powerful and take advantage of a situation. He opined that get ready for warfare and plan to master. There was no concept of retreating from the battlefield. Diplomacy was a weapon utilized as a part of extended warfare that was dependably either happening or making arrangements to happen. In the wake of examining a ruler's exceptional setup of potential adversaries and partnerships, Kautilya strongly computed how the ruler needs to contemplate and perform in this world of international affairs. The ruler who is gifted with the right decision-making powers, he eventually emerges as the right winner. Ultimately, what matters is whether you are winning the game in foreign policy. Kautilya, being a political realist, also acknowledged the fact that each country performed to amplify self-interest plus power in a manner that moral commitments and standards should not act as a constraint between countries and among countries. It was good to have an ally and a friend, but there was no concept of permanent friendship. The ally or the mitra should be handled till it serves the purpose of the king, till it serves the self-interest of the king. And because nations always acted in their economic, political and financial military self-interest, even in times of war had the power to turn abruptly into times of adversity and war. So it is all about time, the right time. The time can convert peaceful situation into warlike situations, enemies into allies and allies into enemies. Anything is possible according to Kautilya. Therefore, Kautilya emphasized that in this world of international relationship, everyone should strive to either conquer, and if one is not able to conquer, then suffer conquest. There is no other way out. Therefore, he advocated, prepare for war and plan to conquer. And diplomacy was just a weapon in this prolonged warfare. What are the tactics of diplomacy? Kautilya provided that a king should always be striking again and again in secrecy. It may not be open warfare. Secret warfare was also an important part of Kautilyan principle of diplomacy. If opposed by an alliance of nations, a king should secretly sow dissensions among the subjects, among the alliance partners, so that the alliance breaks off. So every mean can be used in order to further diplomatic tactics. Kautilya advises that it is better to attack an enemy which is disunited rather than an enemy where the subjects are organized into bands. So Kautilya emphasizes on the fact that information is exceptionally important. There were spies who were sent to different kingdoms to find out information. And if it was found that the subjects were disunited, that was the time to strike a war. During times of peace and negotiations, Kautilya wanted spies and secret agents to exploit the divisions within a country. So if the subjects were disunited, the spies should further create dissensions among them, because Kautilya said that there were 4 kinds of subjects in a particular country, and these were all unhappy subjects. So who were these unhappy people living in a country? Kautilya said that they were, the first category were the enraged ones, very, very angry with the king. The second category was the frightened ones, fearful ones, often living a life of subjectivity. The third ones were the greedy ones, who could always be won over by gifts. The third ones were the proud ones. And secret agents should widen and show dissensions and incite these different categories of people against the king. Now, based on these diplomatic precepts, let us come to the next most important elaboration by Kautilya, the theory of Rajamandala or Mandala. The Mandala system was a theoretical construction of states by Kautilya. Mandala, students, means circle in Sanskrit. It is a geographical concept of division of lands and between the king, and this king means the central emperor, who is called the Vijigishu, along with the neighboring kingdom. So there was a system of interrelationship between the central king and the neighboring kingdoms. It is believed that this was the first theoretical work on ancient system of kings, kingdoms and empires in the intellectual history of mankind. And this model can be considered similar to many models pursued by theorists of international relations today. The circle of kingdoms consists of 12 kings with explanations of interrelationship between them. Kautilya begins with an assumption that your immediate neighbor is your enemy, but the alternate kingdoms would be friends. This is the basic precept of the Mandala theory, that your neighbor is your natural enemy and your neighbor's neighbor is your friend. So what is this Rajmandala theory? It comprises of circle of states of 12 kingdoms. Alternate kingdoms are friends and the immediate neighbor is enemy. But students, there is no concept of permanent friendship or enmity in international relationship, and this has been emphasized by Kautilya again and again. Let me give you an understanding of these 12 kingdoms. Who are they and what has Kautilya spoken about them? The first kingdom, the central one, Vijigishu. In fact, it is the Vijigishu who actually wants to follow an expansionist policy and conquer all the other. The second kingdom, who is the enemy of the Vijigishu, is the Ari. Ari refers to enemy. The third kingdom is Mitra. Mitra means he is the Mitra of the Vijigishu. The fourth kingdom is Ari Mitra. That means it is the Mitra of the enemy, Ari. The fifth kingdom is Mitra Mitra, which is friend's friend. The sixth kingdom is Ari Mitra Mitra, enemies, friends, friend. Then we have Parshanigraha, which is the enemy in the rear. After the enemy in the rear comes the friend in the rear side, which is the Akranda. Akranda is Vijigishu's Ali in the rear. Then we have Parshanigraha Asara, who is the rear enemy's ally. Then we have the 10th kingdom, which is the Akranda Shara, who is the ally of the Akranda. coming next to Madhyama, the central king, and Udashin, which is the neutral king. Let us come to an explanation of these 12 kingdoms in the Rajmandala. The first one is Vijikishu. Now Kautilya says that a central king can be called a Vijikshu only when he has the ambition to capture, conquer and become the world emperor. So he should be ambitious enough to conquer neighboring kingdoms, and he should have that potential also. Only ambition is not enough. You need to have potential, you need to have the right kind of an army as well as a proper and full treasury. Any and every king related to the Vijikshu should also have similar ambitions and strength. But it is the Vijikshu around which the Mandala theory has been interwoven. So Vijikishu is the central king, the ambitious one, and who has the potential to emerge as the world conqueror. The second kingdom is the Ari. Ari is the immediate neighbor situated just outside the Vijikshu's kingdom. He is the immediate neighbor of the Vijikshu, and hence he is the Ari. The third kingdom, the alternate kingdom, is the Mitra. He is Ari's enemy. Please remember this, but he is the Mitra of the Vijikshu. Please note, Kautilya's foreign policy is based on the principle that enemy of the enemy is my friend. Mitra means friend or ally in Sanskrit. Now this Mitra is the natural ally of the Vijikshu, Ari Mitra. Ari Mitra refers to the next state adjacent to the Mitra. Now this Ari Mitra is the enemy of Mitra, but definitely he is a friend of Vijikshu's enemy number 1. Third one is Mitra Mitra. This is the next state adjacent to Ari Mitra, and it is Mitra Mitra refers to, it is the Vijikshu's friend's friend, and he is also a natural ally of the Vijikshu. Then we have Ari Mitra Mitra, who is a friend of Ari's friend. So he is also a natural Mitra for Ari or Vijikshu's enemy. So these are the 5 kingdoms in the front. Now similarly there would be other kingdoms in the rear side also. So let us come to the rear borders. In the immediate rear of the Vijikshu, you have Parshanigraha, which is the immediate neighbor in the rear. And with the same principle, this immediate neighbor in the rear is enemy of Vijikshu in the rear. So see, Vijikshu has to be very careful. In the frontal side he has an enemy, in the rear side also he has an enemy. Therefore the right strategy has to be taken in order to protect the Vijikshu from both these enemies. Next you have Akranda, who is the ally in the rear. So just like alternate kingdoms in the front is a Mitra of the Vijikshu, the same principle applies to rear kingdoms. Parshanigraha Asara, which refers to the friend of the enemy in the rear. The next kingdom, the 10th kingdom, is Akrandasara, which refers to the friend of the Mitra in the rear, and therefore it becomes the natural ally of the Vijikshu. There are 2 more kingdoms in this Rajmandala, the Madhyama or the intermediary. The Madhyama king is defined as one who occupies a territory close to both the conqueror as well as his immediate enemy in front, who is capable of helping both the kings. So this Madhyama is capable of helping both the Ari as well as the Vijikshu, and he has the capability to resist either of them. So this Madhyama students is also very powerful. He can help both of these, he can also resist attack from both of this. So Madhyama occupies a strategic position in the Rajmandala theory. The final kingdom is Udashin or the neutral kingdom. The Udashin king is defined by Kautilya as one who is situated beyond the territory of any one of the above kings, and who is very powerful and capable of helping the enemy as well as the conqueror, the Vijikshu, and he can, along with the Madhyama or individually, can resist other kingdoms. So the Udashin kingdom also possesses potential power. Now Kautilya divides these Udashin kingdoms into three categories. There are three types of Udashin. The first one is Sthana, which means keeping quiet, not saying anything, not taking any action in response to the actions of the Vijikshu or these enemies. So, Sthana just keeps quiet and just observes the Vijikshu and the ally. Asana means withdrawing from hostility. It is when a king withdraws himself from any kind of hostility between any of the king who are in alliances. The third kind of Udashin is Upeksha. So, Upeksha means negligence. It can either be that the concerned king is just not bothered, or when he is intentionally not taking part in any of the diplomatic negotiations. Now students, if you look into this pictorial representation, the entire concept and circle of kings will become clearer to you. If you look into the blue kingdoms, you will find these are all enemy circles. The orange kingdoms are all friends and alliances of the Vijikshu. The Udashin and the Udashin is located far away, but the Madhyama is very strategically located very close to the Vijikshu, Ari and Mitra. And if you look into the location of these students, you will find that in the frontal areas also the Vijikshu has his allies as well as enemies, and the same applies to the rear one. Now, how does the mandala theory work? There are 5 kingdoms in the Vijikshu's front that we have already seen. And who are they? They are Vijikshu, Mitra, Mitra Mitra. These are the 3 friends, and then you have Ari, Ari Mitra and Ari Mitra Mitra. So, these are different kingdoms located in the front. However, students, please note that these system of alliances, whether in the front or rear, are not just static. They keep changing, the positions keep changing, and as it is said, today's friend can become tomorrow's enemy. We will just understand this precept a little later. Kautilya also recognizes the existence of middle kingdoms, and these middle kingdoms are very, very important in the entire positioning of the alliances. Therefore, students, this mandala operates along multiple lines. The conqueror or the Vijikshu may find himself in different positions. He might find himself in the role of a frontal attacker, a rear attacker, or who knows, he might be a victim of aggression if he has not adopted the right policies. Now, these 12 kingdoms constitutes Kautilya's international system. But then students, this is not all. There are 3 levels of analysis of this Kautilyan model of international system. The first level comprises 4 mandalas, the second level comprises independent kingdoms, and the third level comprises of kings and elements, and here you have to remember the Saptanga theory. Let us come to the first level, which we say comprises of 4 mandalas. Who are these 4 mandalas? The Vijikshu's circle of states, which means the allies, Mitra, Mitra, Mitra. The Ari circle of states, which includes the Ari along with the Ari Mitra and the Ari Mitra Mitra. Then we have Mandala's circle of states and their allies, and you have the Udashin circle of states and their allies, and these are the 4 mandalas. Now, second level we have independent kings, and who are these independent kings? They are allies with other kings in the circle. For example, if you look into the Vijikshu, Mitra, 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 these are 3 independent kings at the second level. Third level is a system within a system, and this is very, very interesting. It refers to king and his kingdom. And students, if you remember the Saptang theory. Now, let us try to understand and remember the Saptang theory and apply that Saptang theory here in the Rajmandala. Now, if you remember, Saptang theory refers to 7 elements. They were Swami, Amatya, Janpad, Durga, Kosh, Dand and Mitra. Now, out of these, the king is the sovereign, the king is one element. You leave out the Ari because Ari is not part of the Rajmandala here. So, there are 5 remaining elements. And who are these 5 remaining elements? They are Amatya, Janpad, Durga, Kosh and Danda. Now, 5 elements of the 3 states in the mandala, which makes 15 elements, students, plus 3 kings, 3 Vijikshus, and which makes it 18. So, 15 elements of 3 different kingdoms plus 3 kings makes it 18 elements. So, likewise, if you look into the mandala and Udashin will also have these 18 elements. So, each mandala in the political system comprises of 18 elements. Now, how many circles did I say? 4 circles. So, 18 into 4 is 72 elements. So, one circle 18 elements, 4 circles makes up 18 into 4, 72 elements. Students, this is a dynamic circle. With each conquest, the entire circle of friends and foes change. Kautilya's Chakravartin would have to conquer all the kingdoms of the mandala to become a true emperor. Now, Kautilya emphasized again and again that circumstances change, diplomatic precepts change, circles change. For example, if Kautilya is able to annex Ari, kingdom 2, so now kingdom 2 comes within Vijikshu. So, now in the new mandala, who becomes kingdom 2? It was the old Ari. So, Ari now comes to kingdom 2 and now that particular Mitra becomes the Ari of Vijikshu. So, with each conquest, students, the relationship between Ari and Mitra changes. So, when the king annexes Ari, his immediate neighbor, his erstwhile Mitra becomes his enemy number 1 because his erstwhile Mitra is now his immediate neighbor, and we have already learned that neighbors are enemies. Therefore, just like Lord Acton said, there is no system of permanent friends, permanent enemies, only permanent national interest. It is so interesting to note, Kautilya followed the same policy 2000 years before Lord Acton was born. Let's come to the conclusion of what we have studied today. Mandala theory is the plan, the blueprint for the expedition of the world conqueror. It is a plan to ensure that the Vijikshu emerges as the world conqueror. Although it was enunciated 2000 years ago, it has a high degree of sophistication. Kautilya has clearly defined the universal set of his international system, the boundaries of the 4 mandalas, the circle of states, the structural elements, the relationship between these elements, and he has exemplified a high degree of sophistication in conceptualization, classification as well as application. Kautilya's fundamental objective behind this Rajmandala was to create a strong empire for Chandragupta Maurya, a very strong state system. In fact, Kautilya's work represented the dominant trend in ancient Indian political thinking so far as it regarded territorial expansion as a necessary condition for creation of a strong monarchical system. Kautilya believed that war is necessary and diplomacy is nothing but a preparation for war. He said that a king who understands the true implications of diplomacy conquers the whole world. Thank you.